We can hire 2 junior analysts for what we pay you. Ethan said it without even looking up from the conference table. Cold, clinical, like he was trimming a line item from a spreadsheet. You're no longer a good investment. My name is Robert Davis. I'm 45 years old. Until that morning, I was senior contract manager at Ellis & Hartman Distribution in Dallas. For 10 years, I sat in the same office chair, worked at the same desk, and handled the same critical contracts that kept this company from getting buried in lawsuits. People came and went. Bosses rotated. But I stayed, quiet, steady, reliable. I negotiated clauses with high-stakes vendors no one else dared to touch. I knew every deadline, every penalty buried in fine print, every loophole that could cost millions. This company survived 3 economic downturns because of those lines on paper and the silent work I put in behind the scenes. I never asked for a raise. I didn't need to. I just wanted to do things right. Ethan Miller didn't see value in that. 38, freshly hired CFO, Stanford MBA. The kind of arrogance that feels rehearsed. We need a leaner operation, he'd say in every board meeting. Automated systems, lower overhead. He never said the word experience. Too expensive. And I was exactly that. Expensive. What he didn't know was what lived behind those contracts, and who the vendors really listened to. But he was about to find out. That morning, the HR manager was already seated when I walked in. The air in the room felt like a farewell before a single word was spoken. The meeting was brief. 20 minutes, maybe less. Ethan got right to it. We're eliminating your position effective next Friday. Carol from HR just nodded like it was all part of a well-rehearsed script. You've done good work, Robert, but we need to streamline. We've got younger talent ready to step in. It's just a cost-efficiency decision. No thank you. No mention of the contracts I renegotiated in the middle of the pandemic, when half our vendors were ready to walk away under force majeure. Business, he said. The word hung in the air, as if it explained everything. Business. As if erasing a decade of dedication was nothing more than a line adjustment. Just a red number to wipe off the books. I tried to catch Carol's eyes, searching for any flicker of discomfort. Nothing. She didn't even blink. In front of her sat a single envelope with my name on it. That's all that mattered. I wasn't angry, I wasn't even surprised. Truth is, I already knew. 2 weeks before that meeting, the signs had already started. They pulled me out of the board meetings where I'd always briefed them on key contract strategies. My access to the internal system started glitching. IT errors, they said. 2 newly hired analysts were assigned to learn the legacy processes. I sat down with them one morning. I explained the difference between auto-renewal clauses and mutual exclusivity provisions. They laughed. One of them said, "The new system's going to handle all that. Less red tape." Automatically vulnerable, I thought. The company was migrating all contracts to a new platform, Ethan's recommendation. Sleek software, modern interface. But contracts aren't just boxes to tick. They're layers, interests, hidden risks. That tool could store documents, sure, but it couldn't read between the lines, and it didn't ask questions. During my final week, I sat in my office one last time and went through my personal files. I had copies of legacy contracts annotated in ways only I could understand. Clauses carried over from older versions, never renegotiated. Clauses that, if ignored, triggered automatic penalties. Some locked the company into exclusive supplier agreements for 3 years. Breach meant lawsuits. No one remembered that, except me. On my last day, no one called me for a farewell coffee. I walked the halls like a ghost. The older workers just nodded silently. The younger ones pretended not to see me. But deep down, they knew if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. I turned in my badge, left my laptop on the desk, and walked out. On the sidewalk, I took a deep breath. Inside, Ethan had already pulled my name from the org chart. The new system was live. In their rush to cut costs, they forgot to review the clauses. And the first one was about to blow up. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was what came after. The silence. The sudden absence of a 10-year routine. The feeling of walking through your own house with too much time in your hands and not enough use in your heart. I woke up that Monday without an alarm. No urgent emails. No compliance reports waiting. Sunlight slipped through the kitchen blinds, and for a moment I thought it was just another Sunday. But it wasn't. It was the first day I officially didn't belong anywhere. My wife, Claire, had the coffee ready, just like always. She didn't ask anything, just handed me the mug and sat down at the table. She knew. The pain of losing something you helped build doesn't need explaining. She saw it on my face when I came home Friday. Blank, colorless. Maybe it was grief. I spent the first few days organizing boxes, old files, documents I didn't even remember keeping, meeting handouts, printed contract versions I saved just in case, pages scribbled with notes in my handwriting, request review before X date, vendor requires minimum notice period, clause with hidden trigger, caution. As I reviewed everything, memories resurfaced, moments that could have turned into disasters if I hadn't been there. Like the case with Zetalog, our industrial components supplier. They'd slipped in an automatic penalty clause for switching vendors. I renegotiated that in 2019, but no one updated it in the new system. If that contract went live as is, the company would be accepting a liability it didn't even know existed. But that wasn't my problem anymore, right? I kept going through my notebooks, in silence. The notes I'd saved out of habit now looked like evidence from a crime no one noticed. The company thought they let me go with class, like removing a chess piece that had served its time. But the board had changed, and without me, they were playing blind. On Wednesday, I got a message on my phone. Unknown number. Mr. Davis, this is Cole Turner from Octavia Solutions. We've been receiving automated emails from Ellis and Hartman requesting clause renegotiations. Is it true you're no longer with the company? I only replied with one word. Yes. Silence on the other end. Then another message. Understood. Without your signature, we can't move forward. The previous terms remain in effect until proper notification. Please inform us who's replacing you. I didn't answer, just stared at the screen. On Friday, I got another call, this time from the manager of the new platform they'd brought in. Robert, this is Lila from Consult Pro. You were Ellis's main point of contact on the project. Can you confirm if your team has completed the mapping of exceptional clauses? I stayed silent for a few seconds. She went on. They sent us all the scanned contracts, but several are outdated versions. Some have handwritten notes referring to addendums we don't have in the digital files. We can't move forward with the validation phase. My answer was brief. I'm no longer with the team. I wish you the best of luck. She tried to keep the conversation going. I hung up. Deep down, this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about realizing that what they called automation was really misinformation wrapped in sleek design. Contracts demand reading, memory, attention, things a simple accept button can't deliver. But this was just the beginning. The system would keep running, and sooner or later some hidden clause would go off. I didn't know which one would fire first. But I knew this. When it did, none of them would have time to put out the flames. By the third week away from the office, I stopped counting the days. Life outside kept moving. Cars passed by. People laughed over coffee at cafes. But I still felt stuck in that conference room where I was told I was no longer a good investment. Claire said it was nice seeing me calmer, sleeping in later, without that tension in my jaw. But she knew my silence was something else. It wasn't peace. It was absence. One morning, I walked into the garage. The boxes were still there, filled with my old notebooks. I always kept personal copies of the more complex renegotiations. Part habit, part fear that one day the internal system would get too efficient and wipe out what shouldn't be deleted. I opened the first box. Inside was a folder with the company logo, faded from time. Inside, printed contracts dating back to when Ellis was still considered a rising name in the supply chain market. I'd marked up several clauses in red ink. Potential legal risk. On another page, I'd underlined a note twice. Auto-renewal with exclusivity clause. Without prior notice, penalty is 22% of total contract value. Vendor signature. J. Kern, Vice Legal, Sigma Trans. That contract was with one of the largest freight logistics companies in the state. I instantly remembered the negotiation. Legal had overlooked an ambiguous term. I caught it, flagged it, renegotiated it, and made sure it was never renewed without manual review. But that clause was still there. If they'd migrated to the new system using that original file, ignoring the amendments, it was only a matter of time. I closed the folder and moved on. Another vendor. Another old warning. BioNext Tech, a supplier of industrial components. had inserted a retroactive penalty clause for any unilateral changes to the contract that had been frozen, personally, by my intervention. The new system would never catch the nuance. The notes were handwritten, made after an in-person meeting. No digital trail. Only I knew. That's when I felt something that wasn't quite anger. It was precision, like my mind had finally come out of a fog. The injustice of being let go hit like a hard punch, but what remained now was clarity. That afternoon I searched an old contact on my phone. Anthony Reyes, account manager, Sigma Trans. We'd had our differences, but there was always mutual respect. I sent a short message. Tony, I'm no longer with Ellis. Just a heads up. If they try to change any terms without the revised 2020 clause, you're legally within your rights to enforce the penalty. He replied in less than 5 minutes. They already tried. Last week, some new kid sent over an auto-renewal proposal. I rejected it. Thanks, Robert. Seriously. I just stared at the screen, motionless. A few days later, I did the same with another name, Helena Boyd, Legal Department, Bionex Tech. I let her know that without the signed 2021 revision draft, any attempt at automatic renegotiation would count as a breach of the original agreement. Her reply was more formal. Thank you for the heads up. It appears the new team lacks full knowledge of the contract history. We will enforce the original terms as stipulated. I closed the phone. I didn't send anything else. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was just memory. Ethan believed I was just an expensive manager, but I was more than that. I didn't need to touch a thing. All I had to do was remember what everyone else forgot. And that was enough for the contracts to start speaking for themselves. I started moving in silence. No revenge plan, no desire to take the company down, but the feeling of being discarded by people who never even understood what I did. That stuck with me. Watching someone like Ethan treat contracts as numbers, ignoring context, buried clauses, hidden risks, was like watching someone disable alarms without knowing what they trigger. That week, I opened my personal laptop and began organizing copies of contracts with markings, revisions, and dates. Not for legal action, for protection. I knew how Ellis and Hartman operated. If problems started showing up, and they would, it was only a matter of time before someone tried to blame me for poor documentation. It wouldn't be the first time a company tried to rewrite history once the cracks started to show. I organized everything, built a timeline, included emails, drafts, dates of in-person meetings. Everything proving that the clauses now being violated had been properly handled, documented, and flagged by me. The problem was, no one else knew what to do with them. And with that, time was now working in my favor. On Thursday morning, I went to a stationery shop downtown. I printed 4 hard copies of all the documentation. Each one went into a sealed manila envelope, labeled identically, Dossier, Critical Contracts 2015-2022, Confidential. I gave one to my lawyer, kept one in my home safe, one in a bank deposit box, and one I held in reserve. That same day I called an old contact, Caleb Warden, Chief Operations Officer at Baxter Corps, one of the companies Ellis had been supplying with logistics components since 2016. The relationship was always tense but stable, because I kept the boundaries clear. He picked up on the third ring. Robert, heard you left. I didn't leave, I was removed. He let out a dry chuckle. They're already screwing up. Got a proposal today from the new team wanting to revisit our supply terms. Forgot about the exclusivity clause, remember? I remember. Do you still have the 2019 amendment? Of course. I've got everything right here. Then just stick to that. They're lost, aren't they? No. They're overconfident. I hung up. I didn't need to ask for anything. I just needed to remind them who I was. Who I still was. To the vendors who actually mattered. The next morning, I got a notification on my phone. A LinkedIn post. Congratulations to our new contracts team on a successful digital transition. 100% of our agreements are now running through the automated platform. Speed and innovation at the heart of our business. In the photo, Ethan, front and center, wearing a satisfied smile. 2 young analysts beside him, in poorly fitted blazers. In the background, the glass wall of the conference room that used to be mine. I closed the app, opened my personal email, started a new draft. 2. Compliance, Ellis Hartman. Subject, confidential information. Imminent contractual risk. Body, review renewal terms with Sigma Trans and BioNext Tech before the next cycle. I didn't hit send, just saved it. I knew that soon, someone in that company would wish that email had been read in time. 3 days later at 8:14 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. The voice on the other end was tense. "Robert, this is Kevin from Ellis's legal team. Do you have 5 minutes?" My silence said enough. "It's about BioNext. We just got a penalty notice, huge fine. And could you explain what's happening?" There was a long pause. "Do you think this is just the beginning?" I took a deep breath. And for the first time since I was let go, I answered firmly. "This is the first contract answering. The others will follow." The first blow came on Tuesday. Ellis's legal department received an official notice from BioNext Tech, activating the contractual penalty clause. A dry, to-the-point document, highlighting a staggering amount, $1.2 million in penalties for unilateral breach of unresolved technical terms. The mistake? The new team had sent a simplified renewal proposal to the Industrial Parts Division, without expressly addressing the retroactivity clause. That alone triggered a violation. It was all there, in the 2021 amendment, signed by me, never digitized, never scanned, stored in my folder, and nowhere else. Ethan tried to respond formally, called it a transition oversight. BioNext didn't accept that. They knew the value of that clause. They knew because years ago I made it clear it should never be touched without formal legal review. The next morning, another hit. Sigma Trans, our freight carrier for over 7 years, temporarily suspended deliveries to 2 of Ellis's logistics hubs. Reason: an attempt to auto-renew without dual-party signatures, as required by a 2019 clause. Again, no one had the right version, except me. Ethan began to panic. Heard from inside sources later that day there were 3 emergency meetings at the office. 2 with legal, 1 with the CEO. The company was at a standstill. Orders were backed up. Clients were complaining. That same afternoon my phone rang again. Restricted number. I answered. It was Carol, the same HR manager who had sat through my termination with that blank expression. "Robert, hi. Sorry to call like this. Why are you calling me?" "We're dealing with some issues involving vendors. Ethan suggested maybe you could help us better understand the contract history. Shouldn't that be in the system?" "Yes, but some files are unclear. We can't locate the addendums mentioned in certain drafts." "I'm sorry, I don't work there anymore." "Of course, we understand, but we'd like to discuss a short-term consulting agreement. Special terms. You name the conditions. Who signed off on that offer?" "Ethan. And the board is aware." A dry laugh, almost silent. "Carol, when you let me go, you said I wasn't worth the investment. Remember that?" "Robert, please. Good luck with the contracts. Hope the system can read between the lines." I hung up, went to my cabinet, took out one of the envelopes with the printed dossiers, opened it. Clipped to the inside cover was the full contingency plan I'd prepared back in 2020 for dealing with contractual breaches by critical vendors. Ethan didn't even know it existed. It stayed in the drawer because it was never a priority. Now, it was the roadmap to not sinking. The next morning, the news came through LinkedIn again. Ellis and Hartman faces operational instability following contract disputes with key vendors. The company released a statement saying it is taking strategic measures to mitigate supply chain risks. The headline was cold, but anyone who could read between the lines understood. Ethan had lost control, and the board was beginning to smell the smoke. Late that afternoon, another name appeared on my phone screen. "Unknown caller. Incoming." I answered. "Robert Davis? This is Olivia Grant from the Governance and Risk Committee at Ellis's board." "Go ahead. We're aware of what's happening. And of your track record." A long pause. Her voice was tight. "We need to talk. Off the record. Outside the CFO's knowledge." She took a deep breath. "Would you be available tomorrow at 9 a.m. for coffee, off-site?" We met at a quiet cafe tucked behind an office building. Nothing corporate. Olivia Grant arrived before me. Neutral outfit, serious tone, steady eyes. She was an independent board member, appointed specifically to keep executive power in check. And right now she was the only one inside the company with enough courage to seek out the man they had discarded. "Robert, first of all, thank you for coming." I nodded in silence. The situation is escalating. Ethan can't contain the fallout. Legal is overwhelmed, and several contracts that were under your management, there's no record of them in any internal backup. They were never going to show up there. She tilted her head slightly. What do you mean? I pulled a printed copy of the Sigma-Trans contract from the folder I had brought with me, my initials on the margin, the original amendment clipped on with a rusted paperclip. I pointed to the clause highlighted in fluorescent yellow. Any attempt at renewal without manual review and mutual agreement invalidates the contract and triggers an automatic compensatory penalty. This was signed in 2019. The digital version in their system is older. They uploaded the wrong document. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. And this clause? You wrote it? I'm the one who demanded it. The vendor agreed after months of negotiation. Did Ethan know? He never cared to ask. I closed the folder and placed it on the table. Olivia, what you have now are incomplete digital contracts, unverified signatures, vendors triggering long-forgotten clauses, and a growing chain of legal risk that's only going to get worse. And you have all this documented? I nodded. And are you willing to work with the board? That depends. I'm not coming back to Ellis & Hartman as an employee. That chapter's closed. Then what do you want? I took a deep breath before answering. I wanted acknowledged that the failure was systemic, that my dismissal wasn't a strategic decision but a negligence that's costing you dearly. Does Ethan need to go? Not for me. For you. She didn't respond. Just took the folder. The board is meeting in an emergency session tomorrow. Do I have your permission to present this? Present everything. We parted without a handshake. Just a look. Outside, the morning sun reflected off the glass buildings. I didn't feel relief. I felt precision. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Anthony Reyes at Sigma-Trans. They tried to contest the penalty. Sent in a junior lawyer who barely understood the clause. Suspension stays in place until further notice. Then another from Caleb at Baxter Corp. They mentioned reopening the contract but didn't provide a valid draft. We're ending negotiations. Thanks for the heads up back then. I didn't need to raise my voice. The clauses spoke for me. The next morning at 9 a.m. the board meeting began. I wasn't in the room, but I was there, in every printed document Olivia carried in. At 11:47 a.m. I received a simple email subject, internal update from Olivia Grant to Robert Davis. The board has voted to open an audit on all contracts signed in the past 18 months. Ethan has been temporarily removed. The CEO would like to speak with you. He'll be on the call at 2 p.m. 2 hours later, the phone rang. Robert, this is Charles McKenna. I'm acting as interim CEO following Ethan's suspension. Yes? What happened here is serious. And to be honest, we don't even know where to begin to recover. A long pause. His voice was composed. The board wants to offer you a new position. Independent. Structured to report directly to the board. And what position is that? Director of Contract Governance and Strategic Compliance. I remained silent. With full authority to review, correct, and if necessary, rebuild everything that's been broken. And why would I come back now? He hesitated, then said something that made me sit up straight. Because Ellis doesn't need another employee, and you're the only one who can make sure this doesn't happen again. I hung up the phone and sat there, still, for nearly half an hour. The offer was clear, formal, one most people wouldn't refuse. A tailor-made position. Direct access to the board, full authority over contracts and risk, nearly double my previous salary, and yet, something in me didn't move. Claire walked into the room without a word. She looked at me sideways, reading my face like an open journal. They want you back? They created a new role. And are you going to take it? I don't know. She sat down slowly, crossed her arms. They treated you like you were disposable. Now you're essential. Did something actually change? Or did they just realize what they lost? That question stayed with me the rest of the day. Would going back mean winning? Or would it mean stepping back into a place where trust is temporary and loyalty only lasts until the next cost-cutting round? But on the other hand, that company still supported dozens of families, and the mistakes being made were real, impacting workers who had nothing to do with the decisions. To be able to fix it, to protect the contracts, the right vendors, the fair processes. Maybe that's what kept me tied to the idea. The next morning I went to the Ellis and Hartman building, used the side entrance. The main lobby was crowded with delivery people, consultants, anxious faces. At the front desk, the security guard looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Davis?" I nodded. He pressed a button. "They're expecting you." The elevator to the 16th floor had never felt so slow. Inside, I remembered every meeting where I was ignored, every decision where my voice was silenced, every time someone said, "Don't worry about that, Robert. We've got other priorities." The boardroom was quiet. 3 executives, 2 external advisors, Olivia, and at the center, Charles McKenna. "Robert, thank you for coming." A long pause followed. No one spoke for a few seconds. "We reviewed the documents you submitted. We're frankly shocked at what was overlooked." I wasn't the one who overlooked it. "We know. And that's why the offer still stands." He slid a black folder across the table toward me. Inside was the contract for the new position, signed by every member of the board. Clauses for independence, full autonomy, a dedicated budget, a hand-picked technical team. It was a blank check, but still, a check written by the same company that once removed me like outdated furniture. I closed the folder, took a deep breath. If I accept, everything changes. That's the plan. Then here are my conditions. I began listing them. A full retroactive audit of the past 2 years, reinstatement with compensation for analysts wrongfully dismissed, full autonomy over all future renegotiations, reports delivered directly to the board with no interference from executive leadership, and most importantly, no photos of me in any turnaround or strategic comeback announcements. They agreed. "No objections. Do you need time to think?" Olivia asked. "No, I just need one more meeting first." "With whom?" Charles asked. I looked at him, crossed my arms. "With Ethan." Silence fell across the room. Charles adjusted his glasses. "We can arrange that." "But why?" "Because before I agree to fix everything he broke, I want him to look me in the eye and understand the cost of having ignored me." The meeting with Ethan was scheduled for the next day. A small windowless room, no photographers, no PowerPoints, no speeches, just the 2 of us. And the history he pretended never happened. He walked in tense, dark suit, tablet in hand, avoiding eye contact. I didn't say a word until he sat down. 30 seconds of silence, the kind that weighs more than any accusation. "You look surprised." "Honestly, I am." "You shouldn't be. I thought—" He hesitated. "I thought you'd moved on." "I did. I just made sure I stepped over your arrogance on the way out." He tried to explain. "The board didn't give me the full picture. The system change was an order from above. There was pressure to cut costs. And you followed orders without understanding the risks. I assumed automation would handle it." I gave a faint smile. "Ethan, contracts are like bombs. The difference is they don't explode right away. But when they do, no one knows where the failure started. You want me to apologize?" "I don't want anything from you. I already got what I needed, your removal." He stayed quiet, then murmured, "They're giving you my position?" "No, they're giving me one that never should have been necessary, because if they had listened to what I said, if they had limited your reach instead of cutting mine, this role wouldn't even exist." I stood up, gathered my documents, gave him one last look. "Good luck with your next ventures. I hope next time you learn to read more than spreadsheets." And I left the room. Left Ethan with the same silence he gave me the day I was dismissed. In the months that followed, everything changed. I stepped into the role of Director of Contract Governance with full autonomy. I implemented a hybrid manual validation system, rehired 2 senior analysts who'd been cut with the same cold indifference they used on me, reopened communication with vendors still willing to renegotiate, this time with transparency. We wiped out the fines, avoided lawsuits, and restored stability to the company. The board gave me full access to all strategic meetings. My word carried weight. My presence, once dismissed, was now requested by those who used to overlook me. But the impact didn't stop at Ellis. 2 of Ellis's competitors reached out quietly. They wanted to know if I'd consider leading their contract restructuring initiatives. They offered high-level positions, bonuses, full autonomy. I declined. Not out of pride, but because this wasn't about power. It was about fixing what I had watched be destroyed, and then building something better. with foundation, with respect, with memory. The following spring, Claire and I took our first vacation in years. We visited the East Coast, walked in silence through small towns where no one knew my name. One overcast afternoon, she took my hand and said, "You feel lighter. It's because now I've been heard." When we returned, a new display had been installed in the Ellis lobby, black and white photos of key moments in the company's history. There was Charles, the founding CEO. Next to him, the original contracts from the 80s, and in the center, a small brushed steel plaque engraved with a name, Robert Davis, for reminding the company that contracts aren't just documents. They're promises, and promises have memory. I didn't ask for recognition, but I saw it, and I understood without anyone needing to say it. They didn't bring me back out of goodwill. They brought me back to survive. Once my silence was invisibility. Now it was sovereignty. I said little, but I showed everything. Some contracts break a company. Others build legacy.